Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, sailors, whalers and coat tailors, welcome along to the Joe Spivey YouTube channel where we discuss books and little else. And you join me on a reasonably decent Friday here in the north of Britain. And you join me also for another instalment of our non-fiction November series, the booktube event organised originally by Olive at A Book Olive. In which any idiotic gutter snipes out there that don't read any non-fiction whatsoever, rather stupidly, are informed or persuaded to read some, and those wonderful human beings that already make it a part of their reading routine are persuaded to essentially devote the entire month of November to reading non-fiction. And as many of you know who have been following this series very, very religiously closely, you will know that we've been reading William Shearer's 1968-69 collection of non-fiction, the big long narrative, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Now, I've had a few questions both on my Instagram, Joe_Spivey_, if indeed you want to see all sorts of lovely stories and pictures and opinions, please go follow me on there. I've had a few questions just why it was that I picked this. First of all, I found it in one of my book hauls a little while ago. Found it in one of my dutiful charity shops that are excellent at supplying all sorts of reading marginalia that wouldn't normally be read, and so I thought I'd give it a go. The sort of emanation of Adolf Hitler in 1930s Germany is also a historical topic about which many people think they know all there is to know. They think that there was a gorgeous German democracy beforehand, and this pestiferous little tyrant with his jackboots and his Chaplinian moustache then went and marched on Berlin and took it over and ruined it and brought it to the ground. That is obviously not true. It is a historical bus stop, much visited by whenever you get some third or fourth rate academic, some lunatic that's wheeled onto a BBC News interview who always prefaces their arguments with sentences like, "Oh, well, it's quite analogous to 1930s Germany when ... Ooh, this is very similar to Joseph Goebbels propagandizing when ... Ooh, the rhetoric currently used by insert name here is rather similar to that which was propagandized in the 1930s ... And so I always like to pry into and investigate the topics about which we think we know an awful lot, but in fact, of course, there are innumerable lessons that we ought still to learn from that. So that's enough gavelling. We stopped last time at the point at which Hitler had run through Czechoslovakia and Poland, and this section opens with his march, essentially the capitulation of the sort of, are they Baltic states? Norway, Denmark and Sweden, the latter of which having lots and lots of oil and lots of iron ore in order to help Hitler's war effort, because of course prolonged wars the biggest factor for success in prolonged wars is economic stability and whether you can continue to run a country and also produce arms. So the capitulation of those guys, and then you have a sort of mediocre military strategist by the name of Manstein, correct me on the pronunciation of the surname, who organises for a lesser-known method of attack in the Low Countries, in Belgium and Holland, through the Ardennes. Any of you hardline cycling fans like myself will know the Ardennes like the proverbial back of your hand. It's a little section that is typified as lumpy, bumpy, sharp hills, and so not many people thought you could get lots of tank and artillery through there. There is the window cleaner with his rather large pole, so I'll try and ignore him. So the Ardennes is typified as lumpy, bumpy, so not many people think you can get tanks and artillery through there. He manages to be able to get a plan through, and that means that the Allied forces that are in France, so the French, the Dutch, the Belgians, all essentially collated together, are split into two and forced southwest towards Dunkirk and the other place is Calais. And this is one of the first bizarre points that Shearer stresses, is that at that point Hitler then completely stops, he halts his artillery and his troops to save them for prospective battles, northeast with Russia, and stuff that's going on in the Mediterranean down south as well with Mussolini. This is a really bizarre historical point because many people think that he could have easily if not grabbed Britain by the collar, then it could at least have wiped out hundreds of thousands of their troops. That does not happen, and Goebbels also contributes. Goering also contributes to this decision because he's noticed that the army and the navy are getting an awful lot of credit for Germany's advancements, and being in charge of the Luftwaffe, he would quite like his particular military section to take some credit for once. And so, the Germans essentially stop right when they've got Britain singing and squealing, and so the famous Dunkirk operation, where you've got, Mad Hatters and just random blokes that happen to own a boat on the south coast, all travel 15 miles to Dunkirk and bring back 250,000 men in about a couple of weeks, I think, which greatly contributes to Britain's following war effort. Obviously, Hitler romps through France in 6 weeks. It's revealed that he originally thought it would be something that would have to be reserved until 1942, at the possible loss of 1 million men. As it is, he, as I say, romps through there in 6 weeks and loses just 27,000 men. There is the Vichy France, there is a sort of self-governed southern region, but essentially, obviously, it's Nazi-occupied France, and they have to do exactly everything that Hitler says. And then we have Operation Sea Lion, which was a genuinely concocted plan for an amphibious invasion of the British mainland. And I believe I'm right in saying, this isn't mentioned in the book, I believe I'm right in saying that they did occupy Jersey and Guernsey, or one of the two. I think, Shearer doesn't mention it, but I'm sure they actually, but in that sense, did conquer Britain in a very minor way. But anyway, it was meant to be a Luftwaffe overseen, a Luftwaffe secured invasion. We're going to go to Brighton and Southampton, areas around Southampton and Lyme Regis. But of course, you have first of all the Battle of Britain. And the reason that the Germans aren't able to, get a stranglehold of the war in the air is meteorological. The weather's not brilliant, and you have big gaps in which the British Air Force are able to rally, and you also have technologically superior radar systems. It's not a technology that Germany knew very well. And Goering at the start is attacking those radar systems really, really well. It's set to wipe them out. And for some reason, in order to, in a spurious attempt to crush British morale, then goes to urban bombing and starts attacking the capital and Coventry and my own city of Hull, really, really, really badly bombed. And so the British radar system, also the British radar systems last, when if Goering had continued to attack, they could well have been wiped out. And also that gives them a little bit of rallying time for September the 15th, which is the big major Battle of Britain, in which essentially we and lots of Polish pilots, managed to defeat the Luftwaffe, and it's then very bizarre. Hitler then believes that Churchill and Stalin are in collusion and are plotting their own downfall. But yes, that was all a very interesting episode. Operation Sea Lion was a genuinely well considered plan from Germany, Churchill's reputation stands from that moment on. He's continually revered in this country. His speeches are well known. He has been immortalised in stone around the Westminster Abbey or the Houses of Parliament. There's a big statue of him that they always have to cover up whenever radical leftists go around protesting. So then Britain get a stranglehold. They start to do well in the Mediterranean with Mussolini. Against Mussolini, the Italians do not get a good showing in this book. They are, for all intents and purposes, useless flag twirlers, according to Shearer. Time and time again, they're punched in the face, metaphorically. And they start doing well in the Mediterranean. Then there's a weird series of panics occur. You have Rudolf Hess, who has been Hitler's right-hand man since 24 and 25, when the National Socialist Party was originally put up, and Hitler was, just garnering initial bits of power. In a feat of apoplectic absent-mindedness and what amounts to treachery, commandeers and pilots a Messerschmitt 110 over Germany, through France and into the Scottish Highlands, I think, to go and meet up with a Duke Hamilton in order to then initiate possible peace negotiations. It ought to be said, Hitler at this point is is reverent of the British Empire, doesn't want to go to war with Britain, knows that we've got a decent navy, and reveres the British Empire, and also makes many offers to make sure that it is kept safe within the greater Nazi Reich. Can't believe that Britain hasn't sued for peace, and does an immense job of can't believe how stubborn and stern Britain are in the face of imminent destruction. Rudolf Hess flies over. That those peace talks don't work, but it's just a very interesting scene. And then you also have the invasion of Russia in the north. The Soviets take the Baltic states, and that then means that Hitler is essentially forced into doing it. He has had his eye on it all for many years, and then just in 41 decides to go in. Initially, he's very successful as always, but because he is obsessed with two particular parts of Russia, with in 41 anyway, with Leningrad and with Leningrad, but then there's also the oil fields on, I believe it's to the north, that he wants to split his forces rather than focus all wholeheartedly on one. The Germans then contact the Japanese. Obviously, they've had a pact for a little while, I believe, and they want the Japanese to bomb Vladivostok, which is I think it's the easternmost part of Russia, and also Singapore, which is a bit of a British stronghold. Surely it's a bit of British empirical stuff. And the Japanese refuse, or at least delay their response, and the Japanese work Hitler over a little. Obviously, Japanese-American relations have been withering for some time, and they work Hitler over by asking for and receiving a written guarantee that Germany will act in the interests and on the side of Japan in conflict with any other country, whether Japan are the aggressor or the victims of any said assault or attack which initiates war. And so that then means that Japan can guarantee German support if they attack the US, and they do. They bomb Pearl Harbor, and that initiates US involvement largely. Hitler declares war on them, and goes on at length about how Roosevelt is just prototypical of some sort of Jewish world conspiracy who himself has brought about World War II. Obviously, it's all just completely heinous and misguided bilge. Who'd have thought it? And then you have Hitler's spring reoffensive in the spring of 42, and then again he can't pick between the Caucasus oil, the oil in the Caucasus, and Stalingrad on the Volga. Offers again has a maniacal lack of contrition and of a severe unwillingness to listen to any of his under General Halder, Halder, gets an excellent write-up in this, although he's a little indecisive and not quite as assertive as you might have wanted him to be. He has shown history has shown him to be, in his diary entries, continually correct about many of Hitler's wrongdoings and falsehoods and strategic errors. Then you've got Rommel, who is operating around the Mediterranean in Egypt and is doing really, really well. Hitler initially, by focusing his troops in Russia, actually reduces the amount of power that Rommel would have had, and it is, again, Shearer points out that had Hitler committed a little bit more manpower and obviously artillery fire and all of the other concomitants in war to Rommel in the south a little earlier, then they could well have taken any of the other British outposts and stopped the Allied powers getting a stronghold down there. And then, of course, you have in the winter of 43, finally Germany retreats from Stalingrad completely and utterly, beaten to smatterings and, altogether disheartened and slightly disillusioned with the Third Reich project on the whole. And so that is essentially where I've left it. I am at page roughly about 950-ish, something like that. So I should have it done by the end of the weekend, and early next week should have a complete and accurate and critical and very, very effective, I'm sure you'll agree, remarks on the whole book. But yeah, a few things to highlight again. It's been rather stodgy going still. I'm sort of hanging in there by the skin of my teeth, or hanging from the windowsill, whichever idiom you want me to use. But yeah, it talks first of all about the miracle at Dunkirk, and how bizarre it was that Hitler relented almost and halted his troops. Suddenly on the evening of May the 24th came the peremptory order from the High Command, issued at the insistence of Hitler, with the prompting of Rundstedt and Goering, but over the violent objections of Brauchitsch and Halder, that the tank forces should halt on the canal line and attempt no further advance. How did this inexplicable stop order on the threshold of what seemed certain to be the greatest German victory of the campaign come about? What were the reasons for it, and who was responsible? The questions have provoked one of the greatest arguments of the war among the German generals involved and among the historians. The generals, led by Rundstedt and Halder, have put the blame exclusively on Hitler. Churchill added further fuel to the controversy in the second volume of his war memoirs by contending that the initiative for the order came from Rundstedt and not Hitler, and citing as evidence the war diaries of Rundstedt's own headquarters. So, yeah, great historical intrigue as to just why it was they stopped when it was essentially the open goal to a certain victory. Then we have, this is an extraordinary passage on what Shearer continually describes Hitler as a megalomaniacal dictator. So this is what follows. The generals, as Halder complained in his diary, were now merely postmen purveying Hitler's orders based on Hitler's singular conception of strategy. Actually, the megalomaniacal dictator soon would make himself something even greater, legalising a power never before held by any man, emperor, king or president in the experience of German Reichs. On April the 26th, 1942, he had his rubber-stamped Reichstag pass a law which gave him absolute power of life and death over every German and simply suspended any laws which might stand in the way of this. The words of the law have to be read to be believed. So then it goes on to say, in the present war in which the German people are faced with a struggle for their existence or their annihilation, the Führer must have all the rights postulated by him which serve to further or achieve victory. Therefore, without being bound by existing legal regulations, in his capacity as leader of the nation, supreme commander of the armed forces, head of government and supreme executive chief, as Supreme Justice and leader of the party, the Führer must be in a position to force, with all means at his disposal, every German, if necessary, whether he be common soldier or officer, low or high official or judge, leading or subordinate official of the party, worker or employer, to fulfil his duties. In case of violation of these duties, the Führer is entitled, after conscientious examination, regardless of so-called well-deserved rights, to mete out due punishment and to remove the offender from his post, rank and position without introducing prescribed procedures. So that's giving him absolute power over anybody that disagrees with him, and Hitler becomes a complete psychomaniac that has no control over himself or others, and it's absolutely foul. And then you have the Hitler's wartime shortfallings in the south that I talked about in the Mediterranean and in sort of Egypt and North Africa. And then you have the German offensive into Russia. And where's going to be my final page point? This is going to be, the next chapter that I focus on is going to be on the supposed New World Order that Hitler wanted to bring into being were the war to be successful. This is a really stirring passage from Shearer. And finally, in the snows of Stalingrad and in the burning sands of the North African desert, a great and terrible Nazi dream was destroyed. Not only was the Third Reich doomed by the disasters to Paulus and Rommel, but also the gruesome and grotesque so-called New Order, which Hitler and his SS thugs had been busy setting up in the conquered lands. Before we turn to the final chapter, the fall of the Third Reich, it might be well to pause and see what this new order was like in theory and in barbarous practice, and what this ancient and civilised continent of Europe barely escaped after a brief nightmare of experiencing its first horrors. It must necessarily be for this book, as it was for the good Europeans who lived through it or were massacred before it ended, the darkest chapter of all in the history of the Third Reich. So that's going to be good. That kind of prose is annoyingly absent in this. This was, as I say, another section that was... It wasn't, sheer enjoyment from start to finish. There were a few times when I had to invoke my inner Anthony Trollope and just get down and do it, chain myself to my desk and make sure that some of it was read. Most of it is quite enjoyable, but there are passages of 10 and 15 pages at a time, which each have 500 words on them, that is really gets into the granular detail quite well. But you know, I'm sure it'd be an excellent reference book if I wanted to write a piece of historical fiction on the period. I would have, as I said last time, every cough, every sneeze, every guttural splurt, every single crisp packet opening, every pint of beer poured, every letter given by Ribbentrop to Matsuoka, I think is the Japanese foreign minister's name. But it's a bit much. I know that sounds ridiculous given that I've picked up an 1150-page Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. To say that it's a bit much is ridiculous, but for the first 300 pages I barely even noticed I was holding a book. And also the physical requirements of just the phenomenological heft of this bloody thing is giving me rather large forearms, which is, you know, jolly good, I suppose, given that I'm the sort of, I don't know, some reincarnation of Mahatma Gandhi or something. But yes, I'm looking forward to the final part of this, which is the fall and the Allied forces march west and all of that type of thing. I've been trying not to look a complete fool in the eyes of the window cleaner, who is scrubbing away whilst I appear to be talking. He can't see the camera because it's behind a big Panasonic television. He will be seeing a admittedly rather dashing and well-spoken young man, supposedly just sort of barking at the ether. But no, there he is. Yeah, okay, I think he's going to go home now. But anyway, that was the third of 4 parts of Shearer's Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. I hope I managed to somehow convey, you know, what it is I felt about it and the historical matter that it covers. But yes, thank you very much for watching BookTube, and I will be giving you many videos over the weekend. I've got the non-fiction journey tag to be doing tomorrow, and then my December TBR to be releasing on Sunday as well. So many things to come here. But yes, thank you ever so much for watching BookTube, and goodbye.